COVID-19 forces school to stay out ahead of the summer. Local teachers give more insight about balancing work and life. And businesses are starting to open again. But what does that look like? All that and more coming up right now. Welcome to Cogeco News for May the 19th. I'm James Bowler with what's happening in your community. And to our top story, Ontario is keeping the kids at home to avoid any risks of them getting COVID-19 during this pandemic.
After consulting with the health experts, it is clear that we cannot open schools at this time.
I know the past months have been tough on our communities, on parents, on educators, and most especially on Ontario students. But know that we are all proud of them, all of them, for rising to the challenge and doing the very best in this extraordinary time. Premier Ford gave me a clear mandate to do whatever it takes to keep students safe. And that is why in this province we closed schools, the first in this country. It is why today, following the advice of the Chief Medical Officer of Health, that public and private schools will remain closed until the end of June.
And joining me now is teacher and host of Muskoka Matters, Anthony ASTURI. Anthony, thanks very much for taking the time.
No problem. Good to be here.
So, Anthony, we did just hear from Doug Ford and Stephen Lachey that, the schools are going to be closed for the rest of the school year this year. So just wanted to get your perspective on that, both as a teacher and a parent.
Well, I think in a couple of ways, I'm happy with the decision, but I'm also sad for the kids as well to not be able to finish the school year in the classroom. But for health and safety reasons, for all the staff and all the students, it's probably the right decision based on the information that they were getting from the medical officer of health and from what they're seeing from other provinces as well. So unfortunate, but necessary probably.
So this obviously doesn't change anything for you in terms of what your planning schedule is, the way you're teaching right now, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of us were planning with the inevitable in mind, being that we were going to be in the online environment at least until the end of this school year. So it's, situation normal. Now it will be to see how the year end wraps up in terms of final evaluations and all that sort of stuff, which I think more of that information, now that the announcement has been made, more of that information will be coming out over the next few days. Yeah,
I'm sure the school boards need some time to catch up with this announcement. I know from previous experience, something gets announced, then the school board has to kind of deal with it from that point. So I'm sure there'll be a bit of a period there to do that. One other thing I did want to ask you about was, there's this talk about summer learning as well, which is completely voluntary. They've let know, but have you heard anything about that, in terms of what you need to be doing to plan for that?
No, there hasn't been any information passed along our way. I know as, we'll see what happens, whether that's going to be through different organizations and different private companies as well. For me as a parent, I think it's a great opportunity for my child and I to take a look at some of the programs to see what's available and to focus on key areas that she might be interested in or that we feel that there might be a little bit of a gap.
All right. Well, lots of questions still obviously abound here, and we'll see what comes in the coming weeks. But for now, we know there will be no physical school until the end of this year, until September. So, Anthony, really appreciate you taking the time. We'll look forward to hearing more from you in the future and seeing you in Muskoka Matters again. Thanks again.
Thank you.
All right. We are going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more after this. Welcome back. Joining me once again is Mayor Graydon Smith. Graydon, thanks once again for taking the time.
Great to be here. Thank you.
So, Graydon, we just come out of our first major long weekend. I'm going to put the Easter long weekend aside because that really doesn't count. The May long weekend we've just come out of. I wanted to get sort of first reactions from you. I know you were out in the community over the weekend. What's your kind of temperature gauge on what was happening in the community?
Well, I don't think it was a typical May long weekend, that's for sure. The traffic was definitely down, whether you're measuring that on Highway 11 or in the community. I think there were more people here certainly than there has been prior to the long weekend. We've seen a pretty steady trickle of cottage and seasonal residents coming up since March. So maybe that took some of the, the pressure off. And also with the lack of kind of day trippers and the friends component of a friends and family weekend kind of reduced to only a family weekend, there was many fewer people here than you typically see.
So I'm curious, are you seeing a bit of a fatigue from people in terms of this physical distancing, social isolation? You're saying you didn't see too many people out. Personally, I was out and I saw large groups of people walking around, despite the fact that we're still under this 5-person, no more than 5 people rule. So is it possible people are getting a bit, I guess, tired of being, socially isolated and distancing?
Well, I think not only is it possible, it's probable. That said, we need to keep our guard up and be doing all the things that we've done to this point to ensure that there isn't a second wave of community spread that sets us back rather than moving us forward. So while I know it's tempting to want to get together, with your friends or your family, we really need to redouble our efforts and recognize that, we don't want to put ourselves or others at risk, and that the fastest way for this to end is for us to keep on keeping on, so to speak.
So let's talk about the upcoming summer season and basically how it probably is going to be much of the same with May long weekend. It's going to be very different. And we've heard, first of all, Canada Day celebrations are canceled in Bracebridge. We know that. Hearing details that there might be a few other events that were planned in the summer, specifically for Muskoka, that might be canceled as well. So give me, again, we've talked about this already, but I think it's important to keep pushing this message out. What should people be prepared for this summer?
Well, I think it's going to be a very difficult summer for people that rely on volumes of people to be here. We know that, as you mentioned, Canada Day festivities have been canceled, and Muskoka Arts and Crafts, which is probably the biggest weekend we have in terms of an influx of visitors, also canceled, which is in mid-July. And I think as the days and weeks continue to go by, you'll see event organizers, pulling their event off the table if they haven't done so already. So we're really looking at a summer that is, for the most part, event free because of the inability to bring large groups of people together. So that in and of itself is a major change. I think the other component of it is, the tourism side right now is curtailed almost to nothing. And if that doesn't change, that is also going to put a huge amount of pressure on people. The reality is, whether people like it or not, and I think we should all like it, is that our economy runs on imported dollars from people coming to this area from our own country and from other locations in the summertime. And if we don't have that influx of cash over those 8, 10, 12 weeks, however you want to measure it, there just won't be the same amount of spending that can occur by those, business owners and their employees, because that money will not have been made. And, if that's the case, there's going to be long-term lingering negative effects from.
So let's talk about what is happening with businesses and possibly, what the town could be doing as well. I know Huntsville has a fund set aside right now to help with struggling businesses that may be falling through the cracks with the different programs that are being offered right now from the federal and provincial governments. Does Bracebridge have anything in the works right now?
Primarily, we've been working with nonprofit organizations that are providing assistance to those in the community that need it. We're always willing to look at different programs should there be, an expressed desire or need. At the same time, I chair the finance committee at the District of Muskoka, and we had a meeting last week that looked at contributing funds to Muskoka Community Futures. They've got funding from the federal government to put out to businesses that, again, are kind of falling through the cracks. And if we can augment that money and assist businesses in Muskoka with some pretty favorable terms on loans, then, that may be the way that ultimately we handle that.
So before I let you go, Graydon, I do want to ask you something that's not really to do with being a mayor. On top of being a mayor, you're also a parent. And today, the provincial government announced that schools will remain closed until the end of the year. We just talked to a local teacher about this. But I wanted to get your perspective as a parent and a professional, trying to find that balance as well. How are you feeling about this? How have you been dealing so far with kids learning at home?
It's difficult. To be very frank, when kids are at home, they're not in their usual learning environment, and I think it's hard to suddenly turn your home into a place where kids, want to learn all the time. That said, my daughter's a pretty good self-starter, and with a little bit of monitoring, we can, get her going every day. My son's a little bit younger, and he'd be happy to play, from sun up to sundown. So I understand why the decision has been made. I fully expected that decision to be made. But I think for all parents, it's a bit of a struggle right now. We all want to ensure that our kids are continuing to learn as best they can. Some parents have more opportunity to do that than others. Certainly a concern around childcare for parents that need to go back to work or have the opportunity to go back to work. It's a pretty tricky situation, not only for my family, but I know for a lot of others out there.
All right. Graydon, I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us today once again.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
All right. We are going to take a quick break. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back. Jackie McPherson is another teacher who, while working from home, also has to focus on full-time of helping her own children to learn. Your TV Muskoka chatted with this teacher and mom about the balancing act she's been working on the past few months.
It's definitely been a shift. So teaching online, I'll start with my classroom. So teaching online is not the same as classroom teaching. And it does work for some kids, but there are a lot of students that I mean, even just internet as a barrier is something. But the students definitely, there's a lot of students who miss being able to put their hand up. They're maybe not as confident sending an email. Maybe their parents are essential workers or frontline workers, and they just don't have the support from home to ensure they've got the responsibility and the initiative that they really need to get through the content. The content is significantly reduced right now, and it's still hard to get it from some kids, but there's other students who are doing just fine and plugging away. Every experience is different, and as a teacher, you just have to adapt and kind of figure out how best to support them. And we have a great approach, I think, in TLDSB, certainly at Gravenhurst High School, that I feel like students are they're on the radar.
Talk about yourself then at home. I mean, obviously you're adapting with your students, but you're also adjusting to your kids at home. How's that going?
As a parent, adapting from home, for us, it makes sense to have a routine. It doesn't work for every student or every family, and they both kind of are used to now getting into the groove in the morning, and we try and get all of the stuff we can done in the morning, and then if it's not done by like lunch or even before lunch, if that's the case, like we don't do it anymore. We catch it back up the next day. So whatever steam we've got in the morning, we get it done, and then
Well, that's the thing. It's so important though to keep them on some kind of routine.
If we can. It's a luxury, I think. I think there's a lot of homes that there is just like, shift work. And I mean, I live in my own home. I don't have neighbors in apartments. I can't imagine like how tricky that must be, just sharing more of a life. Like everyone has a complication that they're dealing with. And I feel like we happen to be able to do a routine. It definitely isn't a reality for everyone. And that's something that I need to remember, like as a parent, that it's okay if our routine gets thrown out, because lots of families have routine that needs to get thrown out. And my own students have routines that just need to get thrown out sometimes too. And just keeping that balance, but then also allowing the understanding that when a routine is possible, I want to make sure for my own kids, but for my students as well, that they can find that routine in the work we're doing. And I would say, like, remember the bigger lessons. Like, we're not necessarily here to learn about, I don't know, vowels and consonants, but we are here to learn about sticking to something and getting it done, and the like work habits of responsibility and collaboration and working with other people, including people in your home, just patience. Those they're called soft skills, I guess, are just as important, and I think maybe even more important right now.
And before we go to break, some great news from the Kiwanis Club here in Huntsville. The club worked tirelessly last week to gather food and monetary donations for the Salvation Army. The end result was $5,600 in cash and gift card donations and over 5,000 pounds of food donations. Great work by the Kiwanis Club to keep the local food banks full during this trying time. Now stay with us for a look at how local businesses are keeping up with the changing times next. back. After many weeks of closures, some businesses are now allowed to reopen as part of phase 1. So we stopped by some local businesses in Gravenhurst to get their reaction as they prepare to welcome their customers back.
Today's our first day back open, so managed to get some sanitizer at the door and markings on the floor and plexiglass up, and fortunately we've got a decent square footage, so it's easier for people to spread out, but it's still certainly a challenge to get things up, and it's kind of a wait and see what it will be like. I suspect it'll be fairly quiet, and because lots of people aren't going to be out and about. So, however, in our business, in furniture and appliances, there's a large portion of the market which I don't think would make a purchase unless they could actually see it and have a chat with somebody who can help them.
Already today we see people on the street. Some people are excited about finally getting back into the stores and looking at things and making purchases. Today is quiet, and as people learn the safety measures in place and people confidence builds up, we'll see more and more people. And I think this is going to be the new normal. We're just going to have to be careful and respectful and enjoy our shopping experience, but think of safety at the same time.
People are still being very cautious, but they're happy about being able to get out and happy that things are starting to open back up again and try and get back to a new normal. And we're obviously taking some precautions in the store and making sure that all the clothes are steamed before they're put back on the rack if somebody tries them on. But I'm pretty happy that we're able to open, and we've been able to still continue to serve people throughout the closure with our yarn assortment. But I think it's great to get people back out and get a little bit of sense of normalcy.
I don't see a lot open. I did see some, but I think it'll be a gradual thing. I think it'll take people some time to get their safety measures in place, even to access what you need to do the safety measures can be challenging. And the problem will be having the workforce back in place too. It affects me and affects many is there's no childcare available. So you'd like to have some staff people back, but they have to look after children. So it's going to be very difficult until things are sorted out in childcare for a great number of employees to be able to work, since in most families the husband and the wife works, and if they've got a couple kids, it's like somebody's got to look after the kids usually. So I think that'll be one of the major things that's going to be a challenge.
We're taking our last break, but stay tuned for our recap coming up next. Welcome back. Here's a recap of what's making headlines today. Well, the decision has finally been made. The kids will not be returning to school until the fall. Premier Ford made the announcement earlier today, stating the decision came as protection for the kids. A plan on what the new school year will look like is expected to be released before the end of June. The government also mentioned offering voluntary summer learning, but what that looks like yet has not been released. And businesses are allowed to open again in Muskoka on the retail side, but only if they can allow for social distancing or curbside pickup. However, many businesses are still working to get their stores prepared for this quick turnaround and may not be open just yet. You can keep up to date on all daily local news by tuning into Cogeco News live at 5. That is Cogeco News. For more information on the program, head over to yourtv.tv or connect with us on social media. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube by searching Your TV Muskoka. And remember to watch us live at 5 Monday to Thursday. From everyone here at Cogeco News, thanks for watching. Stay home, stay safe.